Aduro Clean Technologies with the ticker symbol ADUR. I think that this company can 10x or more over the next 24 months. In November 2024, it actually uplisted from Canadian Securities Exchange, which is a secondary exchange, to NASDAQ, but at this point, barely anybody knows about it. I do own about 1% of Aduro. Yes, I own about 1% of all the Aduro shares. And I truly believe that once more investors, more potential investors, learn about Aduro Clean Technologies, the shares are going to become way more expensive than they are today. And let me explain to you why. Right now, Aduro does not have much revenues because this investment opportunity is about commercializing a brand new technology. If they get one big client, this could translate into revenues of about $100 million and EBITDA of about $80 million. Because this is a licensing model where they let somebody else use the technology and they just get a check in the mail. That's the best business model in the world. Very high margin business model. And this isn't just a wish or hope. There are currently more than 10 multi-billion-dollar companies testing this technology right now. And I don't think it should be too hard to get one client out of it. What does Aduro do? Or what type of technology does Aduro want to commercialize? Aduro has the technology to recycle plastic. Did you know that most of the plastic is not recyclable? Well, Aduro has the technology that can take plastic bottles, and turn it back into the ingredients that plastic was made from. And then those ingredients can be taken to make more plastic or other oil products. This is a huge deal. And the plastic alone is a $120 billion addressable market. Based on my research and my personal opinion, Aduro has the best technology in the world for plastic recycling. Other technologies have been around for many years and they haven't solved the plastic problem. There's a reason why so little plastic is currently being recycled. If Aduro's technology is so amazing, is so promising, why was Aduro trading on a secondary exchange before uplisting to NASDAQ? Actually, that's a very interesting story because Aduro accidentally found itself trading on Canadian Securities Exchange because of a certain widespread event in 2020. They were actually going to get bought out by an oil giant. But in 2020, if you remember, oil went negative. And so the oil company was not in a position to make any sort of acquisition. Consequently, Aduro listed on Canadian Securities Exchange out of desperation to get funding. And because Aduro was forced to list on Canadian Securities Exchange, the market never really gave it a proper valuation. And when it uplisted to NASDAQ, it had to uplist at a huge discount because it had to uplist at a similar price that it was already trading for on the Canadian Securities Exchange. If Aduro went public in a traditional way, meaning venture capital and then IPO on NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange, it would probably IPO at a much higher valuation. Let's talk about some actual numbers, and hopefully you will understand why so many multi-billion-dollar companies are so interested in Aduro's technology. You see, recently, California sued ExxonMobil over plastic pollution. Also, countries around the world are adopting policies where plastic producers have to pay penalties for plastic that is not getting recycled or plastic that ends up in a landfill. Consequently, these multi-billion-dollar oil companies that produce plastic desperately need a plastic recycling solution. Right now, Aduro has very tiny revenues, about $250,000 Canadian per year, which is mostly testing revenue from multi-billion-dollar companies that want to test Aduro's technology. So in other words, they send Aduro plastic feedstock to test how it recycles through Aduro's plastic recycling technology. And while the revenues are tiny today, once this technology gets approved, they could quickly become over $100 million or more of royalty revenue. How? Well, you see, the world produces around 400 million tons of plastic per year. And let's be super conservative and assume that only 1 million of 400 million gets recycled using Aduro's technology. And to see what kind of impact a 1 million tons of plastic being recycled would have on Aduro, we can use this illustration that was provided by Aduro in Aduro's investor presentation. This is a licensing model. So I'm going to focus on this table here. So somebody else builds a plastic recycling unit. It can recycle 76,500 tons of plastic annually. So somebody else spends 200 million to build that, okay? And to get to this 1 million that I was talking about, it would require 13 clients to have those kinds of facilities, okay? And this would generate a revenue of almost 70 million for the client, okay? And then that money would be divided between the owner of the facility, and then Aduro would receive here about $14 million of royalty revenue by allowing somebody else to use their technology. Okay, and 13 clients times $14 million is about $180 million per year of revenue. But now that's a very high margin revenue because you're just getting a check in the mail. So that's pretty much mostly goes to the bottom line. So how much is $180 million of that kind of revenue stream worth? I would say a lot more than the current market cap. And if I just took out my calculator and said $180 million and applied a 15 multiple on it, I would get a valuation of about $3 billion. But do we really think that if Aduro has the solution to plastic recycling problem, that only 1 million out of the 400 million of plastic produced per year would only get recycled through Aduro's technology? What if 20 million or 40 million gets recycled through Aduro's technology? Under such scenario, the upside from the current levels is just mind-boggling. We are talking about billions of dollars worth of revenues that are high margin revenues. In terms of the balance sheet, today Aduro has about 9 million Canadian dollars in the bank, and then that money is going to be used for building a pilot plant. Right now, Aduro has sort of a pilot plant. They call it R2, which is used to generate those tiny revenues that I was talking about. And it is used for two purposes: to test clients' plastic feedstock, to show them how well the technology works, but it is also used for Aduro's pilot plant. So they are using it to test and using this data to build the pilot plant that they have raised the money for. Today, companies like Shell and Total Energies are quietly testing Aduro's technology. And Aduro's technology is really the only approach that works in a profitable way, meaning that after the plastic waste is recycled, the finished product is actually competitive with virgin plastic for the production of new plastic. As I mentioned before, Aduro has a market cap of less than 200 million, which makes it a small cap or micro cap. With these micro caps and small companies, leadership is critical. Ofer Vikas and Markus Trigstad co-founded the company in November 2011 after 3 years of research and development. Their chemical team is led by Anil Javar. He was actually the company's first employee and the co-inventor and co-author of the patents covering Aduro's technologies. Eric Appelman, who is Aduro's chief revenue officer, was introduced to Aduro's technology when he worked at Brightland Camelot campus, the largest industrial innovation environment for the chemical industry in the world. For about a couple years, he was very skeptical of Aduro's technology because he pretty much investigated and studied all of the plastic recycling technologies that are out there. Eventually, he ended up leaving Brightlands and joining startup. So in other words, he left a steady paying job for a startup. Investors like to talk about catalysts. I believe one catalyst is their larger pilot plant. I mentioned before that they are currently testing plastic feedstock for its clients with a smaller pilot plant called R2. But the larger plant is very important because the industry demands it. With a larger pilot plant, the potential clients will be able to see how this technology works on a larger scale. Think of it as a franchise restaurant. Once built and demonstrated, other companies will be able to use this model and construct their own plastic recycling facilities with using Aduro's technology and then paying Aduro a royalty fee for that technology. This pilot plant is estimated to be completed in Q3 of this year. Other catalysts may include announcements of big oil companies joining the customer engagement program, patent expansion, or decisions by the existing or future clients to move forward with actually building commercial units. And considering that the company only has about 30 million shares and about half of them are owned by insiders, there is only about 15 million shares available in the float for the purchase by outside investors. That's not a lot of shares when a lot of people want to buy. So that's the catalyst for the supply and demand of the shares. All of this is happening while barely any investors even know that a company like Aduro exists. I don't know about you, but I think that this is a recipe for huge investment returns. There is a reason why I own 1% of Aduro. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I hope you subscribe to this YouTube channel.